So for question 20, Mrs. Deng bought 258 identical Rubik's Cube. Mrs. Fan bought 249 such Rubik's Cube. Mrs. Fan also bought 76 identical game sets at $12 each. In the end, Mrs. Fan bought $777 more than Mrs. Deng. How much did Mrs. Deng pay for 258 Rubik's Cube? So for this, you find the amount Mrs. Fan spent on game sets, which is basically $12 times 76. So you do your multiplication. The answer will be $912. Then after that, you can draw a model. So the top one represents Mrs. Fan, and the bottom represents Mrs. Deng. So this represents $777. Since Mrs. Fan spent $912 on the game sets, it means that it exceeds the $777. Maybe around this portion here is until $912. So the red portion represents the difference spent in terms of the Rubik's Cube that Mrs. Deng and Mrs. Fan bought. Difference between number of Rubik's Cube bought by Mrs. Fan and Mrs. Deng equals to 258 minus 249, which is 9. So the red portion represents 9 Rubik's Cube. So amount spent on 9 Rubik's Cube equals to $912 minus 777. So if you subtract the value together, it gives you $135. So one Rubik Cube costs 135 divided by 9, $15. How much did Mrs. Deng pay for 258 Rubik's Cube? Amount paid by Mrs. Deng for 258 Rubik's Cube equals to 15 times 258. So if you do your multiplication, the answer will be 3,870. Question 21. Cassandra had 5 times as many bits as Charmaine at first. So for this, you can draw another model. So I use C to represent Cassandra and S to represent Charmaine. After Cassandra gave away 648 bits and Charmaine received 216 bits, they're the same number of bits in the end. So Cassandra gave away 648, which is maybe around here. Given away. And Charmaine received 216. They have the same number of bits. So from the diagram, right, you notice that 4 units equals to 648 plus 216, which is basically 864. So 1 unit represents 864 divided by 4, which is equals to 216. So Cassandra initially has 5 units. Which is equals to 5 times 216. And that will give you a value of 1080. So for the multiplication, division, and addition, you can do your manual calculations at the sites. Question 22. Pencil boxes cost $15 each, calculators cost $24 each. So calculators are more expensive. Kelly bought a total of 100 pencil boxes and calculators for $2,130. How many pencil boxes did she buy? So you notice that pencil box are $9 cheaper than calculators, which is basically 24 minus 15. So the total amount of pencil boxes and calculators is 100, and that is fixed. Meaning to say, if you add one pencil box, you have to minus one calculator. And like we said earlier on, pencil boxes are $9 cheaper than calculators. So you plus 1 to pencil box and you minus 1 to calculator. This will give you a $9 decrease spent by Kelly. So we can just assume, or we find out what is the cost of 100 calculators, which is 100 minus times 24, $2,400. difference between actual money spent and 100 calculators equals to 2,400 minus 2,130, which gives you $270. So like we said earlier on, for every pencil box increase, there will be a decrease in one calculator, and this results in a $9 decrease of spending. So right now we know that we have to decrease the amount by $270. So how many $9 must we decrease so that we can decrease the total by 270? So in short, the number of pencil boxes equals to 270 divided by $9, which is equals to 30. So we decrease the number of calculators by 30, we will increase the number of pencil boxes by 30, and this will decrease the total spending by $270, which is what we are finding for. So the number of pencil box bought is 30. Question 23, which is the last question. Bala, Mei Ling, Kelvin, and Devi shared $1,320. Mei Ling received 1/6 of the total amount of money. So the amount Mei Ling received equals to 1,320 times 1/6, which is $230. Third line, Devi received 1/4 of the total amount of money received by Bala and Kelvin. So we draw a model. I represent Bala as B and Kelvin as K, Devi as D. So total, there are 5 units remaining. So 5 units is basically 1,320 minus the amount Mei Ling has, which is $1,100. So the fourth line, Kelvin received 3 times as much money as Bala. So we will basically ignore the fourth line first and find out what is 1 unit of B, K, and D. 1 unit is basically 1100 divided by 5, which is also $220. So total amount by B and K equals to 220 times 4 units, which is $880. Afterwards, we will look at the fourth line, which is basically Kelvin received 3 times as much money as Bala. Amount that Kelvin received is basically $880 divided by the 4 units in total times his 3 units. So 880 divided by 4 is 220. After that, you times 3, which gives you $660.